Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, we are going to be talking about mental health. I think that mental health is a phrase that we hear a lot, especially, right now when this is being recorded. We're currently in the midst of COVID-19. I think that we have probably all heard of mental health. But I also think that it can be a phrase that we hear a lot, but can't totally define what it is and what it all encompasses. And so this presentation today is going to go over what mental health is and why is it important? Why does it matter to us as individuals? So what is mental health? Mental health is not just a single dimensional thing. It is a multifaceted concept, and it entails a lot of different really intricate, details of our lives. For example, our emotional wellness, our psychological wellness, our social wellness. So mental health can often affect a lot of different facets of our lives, including, for example, when I think of social wellness, okay, somebody who is struggling with their mental health may have a tendency to pull away from certain relationships, may have a tendency to have a hard time upholding friendships or, even romantic relationships, things like that, right? Um, Psychological wellness, right? How are you doing personally, right? And I think that sometimes um, we hear certain things like, well, you have a roof over your head and, all of your basic physical needs are met, and that stuff is incredibly important. But I want to really stress the importance of taking it a step further as well, right? Our physical needs are incredibly important, but where do we go after that? What stems from some of those emotional needs, that psychological distress that some of us might be experiencing for a multitude of different reasons, right? And I think that this also goes back to the whole idea of, you know, you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes. You can't look at a situation from the outside looking in and think that everything that might be going on for someone. And mental health is invisible. It is not something that is put on display. It is not something that when you see your friend in a while that, you can just, it's not like a Band-Aid where you can tell that they scraped their knee, right? It's internal, it's personal. And for a lot of people, the status of their mental health, you know, mental health has historically been very stigmatized. And, the status of somebody's mental health can ultimately, be embarrassing to them, or to some people, they may interpret struggling with their mental health as weakness or inadequacy. And it's important that, as a student, if you're listening to this, or as a parent, if you're listening for your student, it's important to do our best to check in with people in our lives. However that looks for certain relationships may be different, but trying our best to help others in the event that they are unsure how to help themselves, I think is kind of what I'm getting at here. So yes, mental health, it is not just one thing. It is just like I think of it as kind of an umbrella, and there are a lot of things that fall under our mental health. And as you may imagine, it being so broad, it can be difficult to learn how to take care of it in a healthy way at first, but it's so important to, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So what really affects our mental health? First of all, I want to, put it out there that, like I said before, our mental health it's different from person to person to person, right? And even if you have experienced the same type of thing that your best friend has, okay, um, pretend that your dog passed away and then your best friend's dog passes away. You will not experience the same effect to both of your mental healths. It's just everybody has different ways of dealing with stress, dealing with, low moods. And so just important to note that it is not a one size fits all type of mentality when it comes to mental health. So to start with biological factors, there are things that are innate and just intrinsic to our physical bodies that can affect our mental health, right? I want to go skip the second one for a second and read, history of mental health and the mental illness in the family. Certain mental illnesses, you can be more apt to getting them yourself if it had run in your family. So for example, on maybe perhaps a more extreme side, some might say, if somebody in your family has schizophrenia, it might be more likely to be passed down to you or a sibling or somebody else in the family, because that has a biological component to it. And on maybe the more, you might say, common side, even depression, anxiety disorders, things that you see very frequently can be passed down, and you might not even be aware of that either, right? Because a lot of times mental disorders can go undiagnosed, they can go untreated, and perhaps your mom has a depressive disorder, but it was never diagnosed and it was never addressed because she had found ways that, made it so that she could continue living her life. But that doesn't mean that you will have the same ability to do that. And that's okay. And that's why we really stress mental health resources. And that's why here at Puck, we offer so many great resources for our students. And going back to that, talking about destigmatizing mental health care services like therapy, counseling, support groups, things like that, right? There should be no shame that is experienced based on seeking help, when sometimes we all need a little bit of support, right? And then I want to talk about environmental stressors and what those are. So environmental stressors are really things that are usually out of our control, not always, but usually out of our control, that kind of happen in our lives, that it's, you were not born with it, but it's happened somewhere along the way. So grief, like I gave the example of maybe your dog passes away or a grandparent passes away. Family hardship, the effects of, maybe financially your family is in a difficult place and you're seeing that happen. Divorce, maybe parents get divorced, trauma, something somewhere along the way happens to someone in your family that has now stuck with you and has now kind of been ingrained, as something that has affected you. That's, happens to a lot of people. It's very normal. It should be more normalized, I think, but trauma is something that, we can't always just kind of wipe our hands clean of it and then we don't deal with it anymore, right? Some events will stick with us. So those are a few of the things that can affect our mental health. And this is not a comprehensive list. There are a lot more. So how can I take care of my mental health? And as a clinical counselor, this is one of my favorite topics. I really like looking at mental health preventatively. It's kind of like taking care of a car in a way, right? If you take care of the car from the very beginning of getting it, your car is probably going to be in a lot better shape regularly, right? And that's the same for our mental health. We want to start taking care of our mental health as soon as we possibly can so that it's in as healthy a way as it can be, going through our day-to-day lives. So taking personal inventory of how you are. This can look different for a lot of people, but in short, I think that the goal is to not shove it aside if we are feeling something that is really kind of eating at us in some capacity, or taking note of, why don't I want to see my friends? Why haven't I wanted to reach out to anybody for the last few weeks? Why am I having trouble sleeping right now? Why is it that I feel like eating, all the time? Things like that. Changes in our day-to-day life that very well may be like a response of our mental health, right? Taking care of ourselves, self-care. Self-care should be something that you are participating in regularly. We want to carve out that time for self-care, right? That means pretend you go to math class on Tuesdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Self-care is the same. We want to say on Fridays at 4 p.m., I am going to do blank to take care of me. Self-care should not be squeezed in. It should be part of our day-to-day schedule when possible. Positive coping skills, things that help us mull and digest difficult situations in our life so that we can manage them more effectively. Um, for example, maybe your positive coping skill is journaling. Maybe you writing down a coloring book, music, exercise, things like that, speaking to a trusted friend or adult. An example of a negative coping skill would be sleeping all the time because it makes you feel better, right? Maybe it puts a Band-Aid on it, but is that really going to be conducive to getting to the root of the problem, right? That's what you want to ask yourself. I talked about confiding in a trusted friend or adult. And try to pay close attention to things that you feel like are triggering to you. Again, back to mental health is not a one-size-fits-all mentality. And there might be certain happenings in your life where you feel like your mental health is especially affected. Maybe you experience physical symptoms of anxiety. Maybe your hands are sweating, your heart is racing when something happens. Maybe you can feel your mood just really decreasing when you're in a certain situation, and it's happening all the time when you're exposed to that. So try to take inventory of those triggers that you may have. And being kind to yourself. And this is very hard. I think that sometimes we confuse ambition with, allowing ourselves to be hard on ourselves, right? So I think that we can be ambitious and have high hopes and high goals for ourselves while still being, giving ourselves some grace and some self-love at the same time, right? Because the truth is that, we need to kind of nourish our bodies physically and mentally in order to be able to grow into the person that we aspire to be as well. So, and lastly, I want to remind everybody that at Puck, we offer free clinical counseling services to all of our students. Again, this goes back to destigmatizing counseling and therapy and making it readily available to people so that our students can start as early as elementary school in counseling. And I think that that is so unique. And, it's a free service offered to our students, and it can be a good outlet to try to work out some of the things that you are going through as well. So I want to remind everyone of that. And other than that, thank you everyone for coming and listening today. Please take care of yourselves and try to do a little personal inventory this week about how you are doing. So again, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope everyone has a great day.